All right, let's dive right into this explainer. You know, drones are literally everywhere today. We use them for everything from capturing those epic cinematic shots to delivering our packages. But today, we're going to quickly skip past the basic gadget talk and jump straight into the rigorous academic dynamics of how a drone actually conquers gravity. We're looking at the precise engineering and physics that allow a chunk of metal and plastic to just gracefully suspend itself in midair. So, if you've ever wondered about the invisible physical laws at play here, you are absolutely in the right place.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to build our understanding step by step, starting with a quick intro to dynamics, moving on to the 4 aerodynamic forces, unpacking equilibrium and propellers, checking out Newton's laws in action, and wrapping it all up with torque, specifically roll, pitch, and yaw.
Let's get started with Section 1, Intro to Dynamics, more than just flight.
So what do we mean by dynamics? Well, it's the branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of bodies under the action of forces. For our purposes today, we aren't just looking at a flying camera. We have to treat this drone as a rigid body suspended in 3-dimensional space, perfectly manipulating invisible physical laws to command the sky.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 aerodynamic forces, the core physics.
Think of every single maneuver a drone makes as a literal tug-of-war in the air. There are 4 specific forces at play here. You've got lift fighting upward against weight, which is constantly dragging the drone back toward the Earth. Meanwhile, thrust is driving the craft forward, but it's constantly battling the friction of drag pushing backward. Honestly, mastering flight is all about mastering this perpetual 4-way battle.
Which brings us to Section 3, Equilibrium and Propellers, the balancing act. You know, hovering might look like the drone is doing absolutely nothing, but physically, it's incredibly active. When lift exactly equals weight and thrust exactly equals drag, the drone is in a state of perfect equilibrium. It just hovers there, suspended. But the very second we want to move, we have to disrupt that piece. Acceleration, meaning movement in any direction, requires an intentional imbalance of these forces. You want to go up? Well, your lift has to exceed your weight. Want to go forward? Your thrust has to overcome drag. Flight is, quite simply, the controlled disruption of equilibrium.
So how does a pilot actually control this? It relies on a very precise chain reaction. Step 1, you adjust the RPM or the speed of the propellers. That singular action alters your force output, meaning it changes the amount of lift or thrust you're generating. Step 3, that change actively breaks our perfect equilibrium. And finally, Step 4, that imbalance gives you acceleration and directional movement. It's wild to think about, but simply changing the speed of those propellers is what manipulates the physics of the entire craft.
All right, Section 4, Newton's laws in action, the engine of flight.
We absolutely cannot talk about dynamics without bringing up Sir Isaac Newton, specifically his 3rd law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It is a centuries-old principle, but it acts as the absolute backbone for how this highly advanced tech gets off the ground. Let's really think about what those propellers are doing. As they spin at those crazy high speeds, their angled blades aggressively push massive amounts of air downward. That is the action part of Newton's equation. Because of the 3rd law, the air has to push back with an equal and opposite force. Therefore, the air pushes the drone upward. That's our reaction. It's just a beautifully simple, practical application of physics. To go up into the sky, the drone literally has to violently force the surrounding atmosphere down toward the Earth.
And that leads us to Section 5, torque, roll, pitch, and yaw.
Now, to maneuver with real agility in 3-dimensional space, a drone doesn't just push up or down. It relies heavily on torque. By definition, torque is a twisting force that causes rotation around an axis. Because a drone has multiple motors, distributed away from its center of gravity, it can basically use them as levers to pivot and twist itself in midair. To pull on these invisible strings of physics, the drone manipulates 3 main axes: roll, pitch, and yaw. By creating very specific RPM differences between various sets of propellers, the craft achieves complete 3D freedom. Let's break down exactly how this works in practice.
First up, we have roll. Picture an invisible line going straight from the front to the back of the drone. Rolling means tilting sideways along that line. To pull this off, the drone adjusts the speed between the left and right side propellers. Say you increase the RPM of the left propellers while decreasing the right ones. The left side generates more lift. This torque imbalance literally lifts the left side higher, rolling the whole drone to the right.
Next up is pitch, which worked on the exact same logic, just on a different axis. Imagine a line running from left to right through the middle of the drone.
Pitching is tilting forward or backward. By increasing the speed of the rear propellers, the drone generates more lift at the back. That lifts the back up, pitches the nose of the drone forward, and changes the angle of our thrust force, which is what drives the drone forward through the air.
And finally, we have yaw. Honestly, this is probably the trickiest concept of the three. This is when the drone spins flat on its vertical axis, kind of like if you were to turn your head left or right without tilting it. It actually utilizes the rotational force, the torque, of the motors themselves. Two diagonal motors spin clockwise, and the other two spin counterclockwise. Normally, they cancel each other out to keep the drone pointing straight. But if you alter the speed of just one diagonal pair, you create a torque imbalance. It twists the entire rigid body of the drone left or right, spinning it like a bottle cap, all while staying perfectly level in the sky.
It is just a total marvel of engineering when you realize how seamlessly these forces are calculated and manipulated hundreds of times a second just to keep a drone stable. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We've seen how perfectly these four forces and rotational axes must align. So, as you take these engineering principles forward, consider this. How do these precise dynamics shift when we introduce much heavier payloads? Or what about when we have to operate in extreme atmospheric conditions, like really thin air or high winds? How must the physics adapt? It's something to think about. Thanks for exploring the invisible mechanics of flight with me today.